Hi, I'm Bob Canote, and it's harvest time around here at Camp Chaos, and we're going to kick it off by harvesting some pistons and liners out of this engine. Dang it. Now, this particular engine is kind of a mystery in some respects. What I do know about it, it is out of a 1988 Jaguar XJS convertible. I believe it's a Hess and Eisenhart, and it was low miles, and as you can see by some of the telltale signs on top here, it's been in a fire. So this is a fire engine. I picked this up as a group of 4 engines from an auto salvage outfit in Port Washington, Wisconsin, thinking that it wasn't too bad an engine based on its history, except for the fire. I picked it up. What's interesting to note is that all the cylinder head nuts have been pulled on both heads, so they tried to get the heads off. However, this is where things get a little bit weird. First of all, the torque converter has never been removed. Okay, and there's a number of reasons that might be the case, but in this particular case, I'm thinking that it has to do with the fact that the heads, well, they made an attempt to get them off somehow. They didn't actually succeed. And the problem here is that I can put a wrench on the crankshaft, and I can turn it a few degrees either way, and something stops me. And it's not the tensioner. It's something else. I think our engine holds an evil secret. I'm going to pull the heads off and see what we got here. Now, if you've been to the JaguarPreserve.com website, which is my business, you will see that I offer a cylinder head puller set, and you can see 2 of them right here. And in the best case scenario, 2 are going to be enough, but I would say about 40% of the time you're going to need a couple sets of these, because some of these are really, really on tight. Some things you should be aware of before you actually start pulling on the head is, number 1, something that's often forgotten, those 3 nuts right there that hold the front of the head onto the timing cover. Head's not going to come off if they're not off. Another thing is, once you get the pullers installed, be sure that you coat the threads with some sort of an anti-seize in order to keep them from sticking and damaging the threads. Okay, and if you're just going to use 2 sets, the second set of studs for the cam bearings, and the second to the last one back here is where you set it up. If you need a couple more, you're going to put them there and there. But let's see how this works. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole process here because I've got a video that shows that. In fact, that is about the worst case scenario. We're just going to do a quick time lapse here to add a little exciting fast motion content. Yesterday was a beautiful sunshine-filled day where I was going to take a leisurely amount of time and remove the heads on this engine, which didn't look like it was going to be too big a deal. But as you can see, we got an issue here, and that is that it's going to take all hands on deck to get this thing off. Now, the back here, we've got a jacking setup where we've got a piece of angle that's bolted to the bell housing flange, a couple pieces of 1/2-inch threaded rod pushing against a plate that has a bolt that's going into the banjo bolt hole for the oil lines, the back of the cam box, and a couple of bolts that go into the cam cover flange, and then a couple of nuts that go on the stud for the back bearing on the camshaft. And then we've got a full complement of 4 of the JaguarPreserve.com head pullers, and then we got kind of the same setup here. We're pushing against this piece of angle that's bolted to the water pump flange, and a couple of bolts for the bracket for, I believe it's the air pump. So basically what we're doing here at both ends is we're pushing upward, we're jacking on the cam box. What that means is we've got to have these studs right here bolted, which go down to the head, bolted in place, and I think I'm going to put a couple more right here. This end isn't that big a deal. It's this one down here that's a major problem. And you'll notice that I've got 2 nuts on each one of these back cam box studs. So we're going to take our time here because it is really on tight. These back 2 studs, you can see I've got the penetrating oil that's been on them for a while. We're just really going to take our time here because this is really on tight. So let's see what happens. Another beautiful morning here at Camp Chaos. As you can see, I got the first head off, and you can see that I've had to go to extreme measures in order to accomplish that. And I mean, this engine hasn't been out of the car that long, and if you look at everything, you can see that there's a lot of rust. And if we look over here at the head, we can see that. I mean, even the valve retainers and the keepers, they're covered with rust. What this indicates is that this engine got really, really hot during the fire. Another indication of that is right here. We can see that the engine got so hot during the course of this that it dropped an exhaust seat, which typically happens if the engine is overheating repeatedly during normal operation. But this is an indicator that this thing just got really hot, and what that tells me is that I'm not sure that this engine is real usable except for the crankshaft and connecting rods. Pistons, I don't know, even if they aren't damaged significantly, most pistons, particularly in high-end vehicles, the pistons, even though they may be cast, which I believe which is the case here, are heat treated. And you only have to get up to 450 degrees in order to affect the heat treat. And you can see the liners are pretty rusted as well, and there's some kind of plastic is melted into this cylinder. I'd say most of this is junk. The liners, I think, are good. I mean, can be reused. With this much rust in them, I don't believe that we can actually hone that out and still have a good stock bore. And that's kind of what I'm after right at this point, because I need liners to hone to 10,000ths oversized for engine rebuilds, so that makes it worth it. Plus the fact I was able to do something that I wanted to do for a long time, and that is to make this rear puller setup. It works pretty well. It's just that everything is just seized on tight on this thing. And those of you who've been busting my chops for not using a plate on this, I tell you what, we've got the equivalent of a plate on here, and it's still not moving. So, or at least the head that I've already gotten off, it just stopped, and I had to use a Sawzall to cut the studs. And the studs are available if I felt that this engine was usable, but I don't know. It just got way too hot for me to feel comfortable about really using any of these parts. All I need to do with this one is to jack it up enough so I can get a Sawzall in there and cut the head off. And then turn it over get the crank out, get the liners out, and throw this stuff in the bin. It's kind of a shame, but you can't save them all. I think I figured out what's going on here. If you look at the general condition of the situation here, I think that the fire was concentrated back here. The thing about metals are that when you heat them beyond a certain point, when they cool, they actually shrink. So due to the fact that these heads got hot enough for the valve seats, or at least one valve seat, to drop out, this thing got to that point where when it all cooled down, it just kind of clinched it all onto the studs. I found that over here on this side, when I actually cut a few of the outside studs, it got easier as well. So I think it's not just the big studs in the middle that go to the water jacket, but these down here as well. So I've got it up to the point now where I could actually get a saw blade in there, but it's still moving. So I don't want to damage the parts any more than I have to. The big thing that I want out of this is the cylinder liners. So I'm going to jack it up until it won't go any further, and then we'll start sawing studs. This is not how I wanted to spend the last 2 days of my life, but that's the game I'm in. Now when it comes to cutting these cylinder head studs, I've used two different blades. First of all, we got the standard General Metal blade for the Sawzall, 18 teeth per inch, and it'll do it, but you can see that it doesn't like it much. What really works great is El Diablo. What this is, well, Diablo is the company, and you can see that each one of these teeth is an individually brazed carbide tip, just like a machine tool for a lathe or a mill. This thing goes through them, well, not like butter, but a lot faster. This is a $12 blade. That was $12 for 5. I'm using this one. If there's any question as to whether these heads are junk, question no further. I mean, this actually looks like this has been run a little bit with a drop valve seat. That's what they look like. But then again, you got that one that isn't broken yet, and that one that is. And it looks like it's been that way for a couple of revolutions. Yep, that's junk. Well, as I suspected, we have a new worst case scenario. I've been doing this a long time, and I've never had to do this. Cut all the studs. Sometimes you can cut a problem stud and, you know, and get away with it. But in this case, the perimeter studs in the middle were just as big a problem as the main studs in the water jacket. So this thing got really, really hot. And in terms of what I can use out of this, maybe the liners. Depends on how badly they're pitted, but they'll certainly work for a 10,000ths over application. And the crankshaft and connecting rods probably, but I got a bazillion of those around here. So $250 engine, if all I can get out of it is the liners and the crankshaft, that's okay. I'll take it. Well, that's it for this episode of the Camp Chaos Chronicles. We've broken new ground here, finding a brand new worst case scenario for cylinder head removal. And that's always a good thing to do, push your boundaries. So if you like these videos where I punish myself emotionally, physically, and spiritually for your amusement and education, like, subscribe, and maybe leave some comments down below so we can know what we can do to do what we do better. So we'll see you the next time on the Camp Chaos Chronicles. I wonder if the recycler will take this.